Imagine a scenario for a second. You log into a patient portal, right?
Right.
And an AI diagnostic tool has just, analyzed your symptoms.
Okay.
And it makes a perfectly reasonable, like mathematically sound, medically accurate assessment. The algorithm does its job flawlessly.
Right. It works exactly how it's supposed to.
Exactly. But that exact diagnosis, just because of how it was delivered, it sends the patient into this spiral of sheer terror, and it triggers a fatal physiological response. The diagnosis itself ends up killing the patient.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So how does a system that functions, perfectly on a technical level fail so catastrophically on a human level?
Well, I mean, it happens because we have this tendency to treat medicine purely as a math problem. We just sort of assume that if you input the correct symptoms, you get the correct diagnosis, and the job is done.
Right, like an equation.
Exactly. But Ousmane Diallo, he totally shatters that illusion in his latest piece for the Cognitive Revolution. He synthesized this massive amount of insight from a panel he moderated called Clinical Tech, Force Multiplier for Care, which is at the GTEX Future Health Morocco 2026 conference.
Okay, let's unpack this because our mission for this deep dive today is to really figure out why emotional intelligence is actually the hardest unsolved problem in healthcare AI.
Yeah, it really is.
Like you and I, we hear so much about computational power and processing speed. But Diallo's takeaways suggest that the stakes aren't just about, writing efficient code.
No, the stakes are human life.
Yeah.
Literally. And Diallo proves this by starting with the incredibly raw reality of how medical news is delivered across different cultures. He introduces us to Professor Mehdi Soufi, who is a clinician practicing in Morocco.
Okay.
And Soufi shared that he constantly has families pulling him aside in the hallway, pleading, like, please do not tell my mother she has cancer.
Gosh, I mean, if you put yourself in that family's shoes for a moment, they're operating from a place of deep, protective love.
Absolutely.
They want to carry that psychological burden of a terminal illness so their elderly parent can just, live out their final days in peace without the shadow of impending death hanging over every single interaction.
Yeah, and that dynamic is deeply woven into the Moroccan cultural context that Soufi describes. But then Soufi contrasts this directly with the medical culture in France, where full disclosure is just the absolute standard.
Right, totally different approach.
Right. In the French system, the patient has this inherent right to know their diagnosis, to understand the intricacies of their treatment, and to exercise total autonomy in how they fight the disease.
Yeah. So it's two completely different approaches to patient care, but they're both rooted in protection. One culture protects the right to peace of mind, and the other protects the right to information. But here is the terrifying variable. You drop an AI system into the middle of this, and it delivers the exact same diagnosis to both of those cultures in the exact same blunt manner.
Yep.
It is completely blind to the family dynamics. It just can't read the cultural psychology in the room.
Because the AI treats everyone as a homogeneous data point. It outputs the same confidence level and the same statistical probability regardless of who is sitting on the other side of the screen. And, that systemic blindness leads right into this haunting story Professor Soufi shared at the Casablanca panel.
The one about the patient in France.
Yes. So a patient in France entered his symptoms into an AI diagnostic tool. The tool processed his inputs and flagged cancer as a differential diagnosis.
Which means it wasn't giving a final verdict, right? Like for anyone who isn't a doctor, a differential diagnosis is essentially just a medical short list. It's a list of possible conditions that need to be investigated and ruled out.
Right.
So the AI wasn't technically wrong to include cancer on that list based on raw data.
Mathematically, no, cancer was a valid avenue to explore, but the patient didn't have the medical literacy to understand that nuance. He was just sitting there alone, staring at a screen that basically just flashed the word cancer.
That's terrifying.
He spiraled into an absolute panic. The sheer terror caused his heart to race out of control. He developed a fatal cardiac arrhythmia, and he died.
Oh my God.
And the tragic irony of this entire event is that an autopsy revealed he didn't even have cancer.
That is just staggering. It reminds me of having a brilliant but entirely socially oblivious friend. The kind of person who blurts out terrifying, unfiltered news at a dinner party without reading the room at all.
Yeah, exactly.
They might be factually correct, but their delivery causes absolute chaos.
Yeah.
But wait, I have to push back on the premise here for a second.
Yeah.
Is the problem actually the AI itself? Or is the problem simply that we allowed a patient to access raw, unfiltered medical data without a human bumper pad, to sort of soften the blow?
Well, the issue is that every single patient metabolizes fear differently. The AI just couldn't calibrate the delivery. It couldn't look at that specific patient, recognize the rising panic in his eyes, and sense like, hey, this person is uniquely vulnerable right now and needs heavy reassurance before we even mention the word cancer.
Right.
So that human bumper pad isn't just a nice-to-have accessory in healthcare. The delivery mechanism matters just as much as the data itself.
Okay, so if the AI currently lacks a filter and the delivery mechanism is the problem, the natural tech industry response would be to just program the machine to read the room. Like, can't we just code a simulated empathy filter?
Well, Diallo actually intervened during the panel to draw a very sharp boundary on that exact idea. He pointed out that AI can simulate emotional intelligence, sure, but it does not feel emotion.
Oh, okay.
And Rabia Kozine, a panelist who is a cancer survivor and now builds patient community platforms, she really hammered this home. She explained that as a patient whose life is on the line, you don't just need someone to list facts in a soothing voice. You need a caregiver who truly understands the weight of what you are feeling.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. AI is learning to mimic human voices and micro-expressions with, frankly, terrifying accuracy.
It is.
So if I'm looking at a screen and an AI chatbot's text sounds 100% perfectly empathetic and comforting to me, does my brain actually care that there's no ghost in the machine feeling those emotions? I mean, if I feel comforted in the moment, hasn't the AI done its job?
What's fascinating here is that healthcare is fundamentally a relationship anchored in shared vulnerability. Simulated empathy works perfectly fine for, say, a customer service return. If a chatbot apologizes for a delayed package, you don't care if it's a machine.
Right, because the stakes are a $20 shirt.
Exactly. But a clinical setting breaks down the moment a patient realizes there are no shared emotional stakes. When you are facing your own mortality, knowing that the entity comforting you has absolutely no concept of what it means to die, it shatters the illusion.
Oh, yeah.
Patients instinctively know the difference between a calculated string of text and a human being who is genuinely carrying the heavy, sinking weight of bad news with them.
Because there's no human solidarity in a server rack.
No, there isn't.
So if patients can easily see through that simulated empathy, what happens to the medical students who are being trained right now to rely on these very machines?
Yeah.
Are we basically training a generation of doctors to be chatbots?
Well, Professor Sufi is seeing this shift happen in real time. In addition to practicing, he is the dean of the medical faculty in Agadir.
Oh, wow. Well,
Yeah, and he noted that medical students are increasingly entering a state of just being in listening mode to respond. They are constantly anticipating the algorithm's output rather than generating their own hypotheses, which is leading to a massive loss of clinical autonomy.
that's concerning.
He actually offered a very blunt warning to his colleagues. He said, "The day the internet stops, we will all be stuck."
Oh, man, it's the GPS effect.
Exactly.
Think about it. Before smartphones, you had an internal map of your city in your head. You knew the landmarks. You knew how the streets connected. You knew which way was north.
Yeah, you had to.
Now, if you're anything like me, you just blindly follow the little blue line on your phone. If the battery dies, you are completely lost in your own neighborhood. Are medical students losing their internal clinical compass because they're just following the algorithmic blue line?
That's a perfect analogy. And just like a dead phone battery leaves you stranded, Sufi is seeing medical students intellectually stranded the moment they can't outsource their thinking. And to be clear, Sufi is not a Luddite.
Right. He's not anti-tech.
Not at all. He embraces AI as a tool for drafting emails or conducting massive literature reviews. But he draws a hard line when the tool becomes a crutch that bypasses critical thinking. He used dermatology as a prime example.
Oh, so.
Well, today, a medical student can take a smartphone, snap a photo of a skin lesion, let an AI scan it, and instantly generate a prescription.
So the AI gets to the what instantly, bypassing the entire investigative process.
Right. And think about what the student actively fails to learn in that scenario. They aren't learning how to physically examine the texture of the lesion. They aren't sitting down to ask the patient about their family history or environmental exposures.
They're just taking a picture.
Exactly. They aren't developing that unspoken clinical intuition that triggers a seasoned doctor to realize, like, hey, the algorithm says eczema, but something else is fundamentally wrong here. Above all, they aren't learning how to accompany that unique person through the anxiety of their healing trajectory.
They're outsourcing the human journey to an app.
Yeah.
But we do have to look at the reality on the ground in different parts of the world.
For sure.
We're talking about losing the human connection. But what if there's no human doctor available to begin with? In some places, an AI crutch might literally be the only tool you have access to.
That is such a critical point, and Rabia Kozain's work centers entirely on this reality. She builds health tech specifically for African patients, and she brought a jarring statistical reality to the panel.
What was it?
Well, in Western countries, the healthcare system might operate with a doctor-patient ratio of roughly 1 to 300.
Okay.
But in the context where Kozain works, that ratio regularly hits 1 to 2,000 or even 1 to 3,000.
Wow. I mean, imagine being one of 3,000 people relying on a single physician. You would be waiting days, maybe weeks, just to have someone look at a severe infection or a concerning lump.
Precisely. And because of that extreme bottleneck, Kozain maps out a framework she calls the 6 forms of trust.
Okay, let's go through those.
Yeah, these are the fragile fault lines that can easily rupture in highly stressed, resource-starved medical systems. The first is reliability. If you rely entirely on a digital system because there is no doctor, what happens when the power grid fails or the servers go down?
The trust instantly breaks. And the second form of trust she outlines is algorithms, right? This happens when desperate patients blindly trust predictions without understanding the technology's limits. Like, if a pregnant mother is told by an app that her symptoms are normal, she might stay home instead of seeking emergency care simply because she assumes the machine is infallible.
Yeah, which is incredibly dangerous. And then the third is misinformation. This is when patients choose to believe falsehoods over scientific reality because the misinformation aligns more comfortably with their cultural worldview. An AI cannot look a patient in the eye and gently unravel deeply held, dangerous medical myths.
Which bleeds right into the fourth form, which is platform as partner. This is where the technology doesn't just assist the doctor, it replaces the doctor entirely due to that 1 to 3,000 ratio.
Right. And when the app becomes the doctor, you run face first into the 5th form of trust breaking down, which is community risk. Healthcare doesn't happen in a vacuum. If an AI platform issues a generic, culturally insensitive piece of medical advice, word spreads rapidly through local patient networks.
Oh, that makes sense.
A single misunderstood output can poison an entire community's trust in modern medicine.
And finally, there is dependency.
Yeah.
Patients might actively disconnect from the few human clinicians that do exist, simply because logging into an app is infinitely easier than walking 10 miles to a clinic and waiting in the heat for 12 hours.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you if you were living in that 1 to 3,000 ratio area? How do you possibly balance the risk of becoming dependent on an unfeeling algorithm with the desperate life or death need for basic medical access?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that healthcare isn't just a transaction of data. It is a fragile relationship suspended between hope and reality. AI can process diagnostic information faster and reach thousands of people in a resource-starved area simultaneously, but an algorithm cannot navigate community relationships. It doesn't have the social capital required to build trust in a skeptical village. It can't hold a mother's hand and counteract the fear driving her to refuse a vaccine. AI is a brilliant tool for scale, but trust simply does not scale algorithmically. Trust is built one human interaction at a time.
So if the risks are this vast, ranging from a patient suffering a fatal panic attack in France to an entire community losing trust in a medical system in Africa, what does successful AI integration actually look like? Like, how do you even measure success when the stakes are this high?
Well, Diallo introduces the perspective of Amin Moussaoui, who manages Morocco's blood transfusion systems.
Okay.
Moussaoui offers this invisible success metric. He stated on the panel, "The day clinicians stop talking about the information system is the day we have succeeded."
Oh, I love that. It's like the stage crew in a massive theater production. If you notice the stage crew fumbling with the props while the spotlight is on, the play is ruined. The best technology should be entirely invisible to the audience. The patient.
Yeah.
It should just silently elevate the lead actors, which are the doctors and nurses.
Exactly. And Moussaoui explains that achieving this invisibility requires the alignment of 3 specific dimensions: technology capabilities, business processes, and user workflow. It is never about replacing the clinician.
Right.
It is about designing a seamless system that helps the doctor work better, more calmly, and more accurately. If a new AI tool disrupts a nurse's workflow or adds administrative stress, it is a failure, regardless of how brilliant the underlying code is.
And Professor Soufi proved this exact point with a brilliant experiment he ran with the audience at the end of the panel. He asked the room, Who here would trust a prescription from a computer that only reads an ECG, or trust a dermatology diagnosis from an algorithm? And just for context for you listening, an ECG is an electrocardiogram. It's the test that traces the electrical rhythm of your heart to check for abnormalities.
Yeah, and very few hands went up for trusting the machine with a heart rhythm or a cancer scan. But then Sufi asked the room, who uses AI to write emails?
Let me guess.
Suddenly, nearly every hand in the auditorium shot up.
Because it all comes down to consequence and context. Sufi pointed out that the difference isn't the technical capability of the machine. The AI is more than capable of reading an ECG accurately. It can analyze the borders of a skin lesion with incredible precision. But email is a fundamentally low-stakes environment.
Right.
If the AI gets the tone of your email slightly wrong, you backspace, you fix a typo, and you hit send. The cost of a hallucination or an error is essentially zero.
But healthcare is the ultimate high-stakes environment. If the AI misreads a cardiac rhythm, someone dies on the table. If it misclassifies a lesion, a melanoma spreads silently for 6 months. And what makes this dynamic even more dangerous is that, unlike an email, where you intuitively know what message you wanted to convey, a patient lacks the medical expertise to know when the AI is hallucinating or just plain wrong.
Beyond the sheer consequence of an error, there's the raw vulnerability of the moment. An email is something that comes from you. A medical diagnosis is something that comes at you.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It hits you in a moment when you are stripped of your defenses, sitting in a paper gown, entirely vulnerable. You don't just need the cold data of the diagnosis. You desperately need the human care that helps you absorb that blow and figure out what to do next.
And pulling all these threads together from the GITEX panel, Rabia Kozine crystallized the solution when she called for partnership, not exclusivity.
Partnership.
Yes. AI and human intelligence have to operate symbiotically. The algorithm augments the clinician's judgment, but it never, ever substitutes the human relationship. Dr. Owatara, another voice from the systems management side of the panel, reminded the audience that having the data alone is never enough. The user, meaning the patient, has to remain at the absolute center of every decision.
Because emotional intelligence isn't some premium add-on feature that a hospital can just, patch into the software down the line. It is the very foundation of care itself. It is how a clinician knows when to push aggressively for treatment and when to gently pivot to offering comfort.
Exactly.
It's how they know when a patient needs to hear every single clinical detail and when a fragile psyche needs to be protected from information overload. The humans in the loop aren't just there as a safety mechanism to catch coding glitches. The humans are the entire point of the healing process.
It really forces a profound shift in how we envision the future of medicine. I mean, we have spent the last century selecting and training doctors based largely on their ability to memorize vast amounts of data and recall it under pressure.
Right.
But if the machine eventually handles all the raw data, all the pattern recognition, and all the differential diagnoses seamlessly, the value of rote memorization plummets. We will have to fundamentally restructure medical education to select doctors based primarily on their capacity for empathy and complex communication.
It really leaves you with a provocative thought. What will a medical degree look like in 20 years? Will it look less like a hard science PhD focused on cellular biology and much more like a degree in advanced psychology, specialized grief counseling, and deep human connection?
It's a fascinating question.
It's definitely something to ponder the next time you find yourself sitting in a doctor's office waiting for test results. Because as we saw with the tragic story in France at the very beginning of this deep dive, an AI can generate a flawlessly accurate, perfectly reasonable diagnosis. But without a human being there to help you carry the weight of that information, being perfectly right can still go perfectly wrong.